The Arabian Nights, or the 1001 Nights. Last night, Shahrazad was telling the story of the merchant and the demon. So this night, Dinarzad said again, "Sister, if you are not sleepy, tell us one of your lovely little tales to while away the night." Shahrazad replied, "With the greatest pleasure." And so we entered the fourth night. So the first old man with the deer approached the demon and, kissing his hands and feet, said, "Fiend and king of the demon kings, if I tell you what happened to me and that deer, and you find it strange and amazing, indeed stranger and more amazing than what happened to you and the merchant, will you grant me a third of your claim on him for his crime and guilt?" The demon replied, "I will." The old man told his story. The first old man's tale. "Demon, this deer is my cousin, my flesh and blood. I married her when I was very young, and she, a girl who reached womanhood only afterward. For 30 years we lived together, but I was not blessed with children, for she bore neither boy nor girl. Yet I continued to be kind to her, to care for her, and to treat her generously. Then I took a mistress, and she bore me a son, who grew up to look like a slice of the moon. Meanwhile, my wife grew jealous of my mistress and my son. One day, when he was 10, I had to go on a journey. I entrusted my wife, this one here, with my mistress and son, bade her take good care of them, and was gone for a whole year. In my absence, my wife, this cousin of mine, learned soothsaying and magic and cast a spell on my son and turned him into a young bull. Then she summoned my shepherd, gave my son to him, and said, 'Tend this bull with the rest of the cattle.' The shepherd took him and tended him for a while. Then she cast a spell on the mother, turning her into a cow, and gave her also to the shepherd. When I came back after all this was done, and inquired about my mistress and my son, she answered, 'Your mistress died, and your son ran away 2 months ago, and I have had no news from him ever since. When I heard her, I grieved for my mistress, and with an anguished heart I mourned for my son for nearly a year. When the great feast of the immolation drew near, I summoned the shepherd and ordered him to bring me a fat cow for the sacrifice. The cow he brought me was in reality my enchanted mistress. When I bound her and pressed against her to cut her throat, she wept and cried, as if saying, 'My son, my son,' and her tears coursed down her cheeks. Astonished and seized with pity, I turned away and asked the shepherd to bring me a different cow, but my wife shouted, 'Go on, butcher her, for he has none better or fatter. Let us enjoy her meat at feast time.' I approached the cow to cut her throat, and again she cried, as if saying, 'My son, my son.' Then I turned away from her and said to the shepherd, 'Butcher her for me.' The shepherd butchered her, and when he skinned her, he found neither meat nor fat, but only skin and bone. I regretted having her butchered, and said to the shepherd, 'Take her all for yourself, or give her as alms to whomever you wish, and find me a fat young bull from among the flock.' The shepherd took her away and disappeared, and I never knew what he did with her. Then he brought me my son, my heartblood, in the guise of a fat young bull. When my son saw me, he shook his head loose from the rope, ran toward me, and, throwing himself at my feet, kept rubbing his head against me. I was astonished and touched with sympathy, pity, and mercy, for the blood hearkened to the blood and the divine bond, and my heart throbbed within me when I saw the tears coursing over the cheeks of my son, the young bull, as he dug the earth with his hoofs. I turned away and said to the shepherd, 'Let him go with the rest of the flock and be kind to him, for I have decided to spare him. Bring me another one instead of him.' My wife, this very deer, shouted, 'You shall sacrifice none but this bull.' I got angry and replied, 'I listened to you and butchered the cow uselessly. I will not listen to you and kill this bull, for I have decided to spare him.' but she pressed me, saying, "You must butcher this bull." And I bound him and took the knife. But dawn broke, and morning overtook Shahrazad, and she lapsed into silence, leaving the king all curiosity for the rest of the story. Then her sister Dinarzad said, "What an incredible story!" Shahrazad replied, "Tomorrow night I shall tell you something even stranger, more wonderful and more entertaining, if the king spares me and lets me live." And so the fifth night arrived. In the king's room, Dinarzad said to her sister Shahrazad, "Please, sister, if you are not sleepy, tell us one of your little tales." Shahrazad replied, "With the greatest pleasure. I heard, dear king, that the old man with the deer said to the demon and to his companions, 'So I took the knife, and as I turned to slaughter my son, he wept, bellowed, rolled at my feet, and motioned toward me with his tongue. I suspected something, began to waver with trepidation and pity, and finally released him, saying to my wife, I have decided to spare him and I commit him to your care. Then I tried to appease and please my wife, this very deer, by slaughtering another bull, promising her to slaughter this one next season. We slept that night, and when God's dawn broke, the shepherd came to me without letting my wife know and said, "Give me credit for bringing you good news," or I replied, "Tell me, and the credit is yours." He said, "Master, I have a daughter who is fond of soothsaying and magic and who is adept at the art of oaths and spells. Yesterday, I took home with me the bull you had spared to let him graze with the cattle, and when my daughter saw him, she laughed and cried at the same time. When I asked her why she laughed and cried, she answered that she laughed because the bull was in reality the son of our master, the cattle owner, put under a spell by his stepmother, and that she cried because his father had slaughtered the son's mother. I could hardly wait till daybreak to bring you the good news about your son." Demon, when I heard that, I uttered a cry and fainted, and when I came to myself, I accompanied the shepherd to his home, went to my son, and threw myself at him, kissing him and crying. He turned his head toward me, his tears coursing over his cheeks, and dangled his tongue as if to say, "Look at my plight." Then I turned to the shepherd's daughter and asked, "Can you release him from the spell? If you do, I will give you all my cattle and all my possessions." She smiled and replied, "Master, I have no desire for your wealth, cattle, or possessions. I will deliver him, but on two conditions. First, that you let me marry him. Second, that you let me cast a spell on her who had cast a spell on him, in order to control her and guard against her evil power." I replied, "Do whatever you wish and more. My possessions are for you and my son. As for my wife, who has done this to my son and made me slaughter his mother, her life is forfeit to you." She said, "No, but I will let her taste what she has inflicted on others." Then the shepherd's daughter filled a bowl with water, uttered an incantation and an oath, and said to my son, "Bull, if you have been created in this image by the Lord, stay as you are, but if you have been treacherously put under a spell, change back to your human form by the will of God." Then she sprinkled him with the water, and he shook himself and changed from a bull back to his human form. As I rushed to him, I fainted, and when I came to myself, he told me what my wife, this very deer, had done to him and to his mother. I said to him, "Son, God has sent us someone who will pay her back for what you and your mother and I have suffered at her hands." Then, O demon, I gave my son in marriage to the shepherd's daughter, who turned my wife into this very deer, saying to me, this is a pretty form, for she will be with us day and night, and it is better to turn her into a pretty deer than to suffer her sinister looks." Thus she stayed with us, while the days and nights followed one another, and the months and years went by. Then one day the shepherd's daughter died, and my son went to the country of this very man with whom you have had your encounter. Some time later, I took my wife, this very dear, with me, set out to find out what had happened to my son, and chanced to stop here. This is my story, my strange and amazing story. The demon assented, saying, I grant you 1/3 of this man's life. Then, O King Shahryar, the second old man with the 2 black dogs, approached the demon and said, I too shall tell you what happened to me and to these 2 dogs, and if I tell it to you and you find it stranger and more amazing than this man's story, will you grant me 1/3 of this man's life? The demon replied, I will. Then the old man began to tell his story, saying, But dawn broke, and morning overtook Scheherazade, and she lapsed into silence. Then Dinarzade said, This is truly an amazing story, and Scheherazade replied, What is this compared with what I shall tell you tomorrow night, if the king spares me and lets me live? The king said to himself, By God, I will not have her put to death until I find out what happened to the man with the 2 black dogs. Then I will have her put to death. So we are now in the 6th night. When the following night arrived and Shahrazad was in bed with King Shahryar, her sister Dinarzade said, Sister, if you are not sleepy, tell us a little tale. Finish the one you started. Shahrazad replied, With the greatest pleasure. I heard, O happy king, that the second old man with the 2 dogs said, The second old man's tale. Demon, as for my story, these are the details. These 2 dogs are my brothers. When our father died, he left behind 3 sons and left us 3,000 dinars. With that, each of us opened a shop and became a shopkeeper. Soon my older brother, one of these very dogs, went and sold the contents of his shop for 1,000 dinars, bought trading goods, and having prepared himself for his trading trip, left us. A full year went by when one day, as I sat in my shop, a beggar stopped by to beg. When I refused him, he tearfully asked, Don't you recognize me? And when I looked at him closely, I recognized my brother. I embraced him and took him into the shop, and when I asked him about his plight, he replied, The money is gone, and the situation is bad. Then I took him to the public bath, clothed him in one of my robes, and took him home with me. Then I examined my books and checked my balance, and found out that I had made 1,000 dinars and that my net worth was 2,000 dinars. I divided the amount between my brother and myself, and said to him, Think as if you have never been away. He gladly took the money and opened another shop. Soon afterward, my second brother, this other dog, went and sold his merchandise and collected his money, intending to go on a trading trip. We tried to dissuade him, but he did not listen. Instead, he bought merchandise and trading goods, joined a group of travelers, and was gone for a full year. Then he came back, just like his older brother. I said to him, Brother, didn't I advise you not to go? He replied tearfully, Brother, it was foreordained. Now I am poor and penniless, without even a shirt on my back. Demon, I took him to the public bath, clothed him in one of my new robes, and took him back to the shop. After we had something to eat, I said to him, Brother, I shall do my business accounts, calculate my net worth for the year, and after subtracting the capital, whatever the profit happens to be, I shall divide it equally between you and myself. When I examined my books and subtracted the capital, I found out that my profit was 2,000 dinars, and I thanked God and felt very happy. Then I divided the money, giving him 1,000 dinars and keeping 1,000 for myself. With that money, he opened another shop, and the 3 of us stayed together for a while. Then my 2 brothers asked me to go on a trading journey with them, but I refused, saying, What did you gain from your ventures that I can gain? They dropped the matter, and for 6 years we worked in our stores buying and selling. Yet every year they asked me to go on a trading journey with them, but I refused, until I finally gave in. I said, "But brothers, I am ready to go with you. How much money do you have?" I found out that they had eaten and drunk and squandered everything they had, but I said nothing to them and did not reproach them. Then I took inventory, gathered all I had together, and sold everything. I was pleased to discover that the sale netted 6,000 dinars. Then I divided the money into 2 parts and said to my brothers, "The sum of 3,000 dinars is for you and myself to use on our trading journey. The other 3,000 I shall bury in the ground, in case what happened to you happens to me, so that when we return, we will find 3,000 dinars to reopen our shops." They replied, "This is an excellent idea." Then, demon, I divided my money and buried 3,000 dinars. Of the remaining 3, I gave each of my brothers 1,000 and kept 1,000 for myself. After I closed my shop, we bought merchandise and trading goods, rented a large seafaring boat, and after loading it with our goods and provisions, sailed day and night for a month. But morning overtook Scheherazade, and she lapsed into silence. Then her sister Dinarzade said, "Sister, what a lovely story." Shahrazad replied, "Tomorrow night I shall tell you something even lovelier, stranger, and more wonderful if I live, the Almighty God willing." We are now in the 7th night. The following night, Dinarzade said to her sister Shahrazad, "For God's sake, sister, if you are not sleepy, tell us a little tale." The king added, "Let it be the completion of the story of the merchant and the demon." Shahrazad replied, "With the greatest pleasure. I heard, O happy king, that the second old man said to the demon, 'For a month, my brothers, these very dogs, and I sailed the salty sea, until we came to a port city. We entered the city and sold our goods, earning 10 dinars for every dinar. Then we bought other goods, and when we got to the seashore to embark, I met a girl who was dressed in tatters. She kissed my hands and said, 'O my lord, be charitable and do me a favor, and I believe that I shall be able to reward you for it.' I replied, 'I am willing to do you a favor regardless of any reward.' She said, 'O my lord, marry me, clothe me, and take me home with you on this boat as your wife, for I wish to give myself to you. I, in turn, will reward you for your kindness and charity. Don't be misled by my poverty and present condition.' When I heard her words, I felt pity for her, and guided by what God had intended for me, I consented. I clothed her with an expensive dress and married her. Then I took her to the boat, spread the bed for her, and consummated our marriage. We sailed many days and nights, and I, feeling love for her, stayed with her day and night, neglecting my brothers. In the meantime, these very dogs, grew jealous of me, envied me for my increasing merchandise and wealth, and coveted all our possessions. At last, they decided to betray me and, tempted by the devil, plotted to kill me. One night they waited until I was asleep beside my wife. Then they carried the 2 of us and threw us into the sea. When we awoke, my wife had turned into a she-demon and carried me out of the sea to an island. When it was morning, she said, "Husband, I have rewarded you by saving you from drowning, for I am one of the demons who believe in God. When I saw you by the seashore, I felt love for you and came to you in the guise in which you saw me, and when I expressed my love for you, you accepted me. Now I must kill your brothers." When I heard what she said, I was amazed, and I thanked her and said, "As for destroying my brothers, this I do not wish, for I will not behave like them." Then I related to her what had happened to me and them, from beginning to end. When she heard my story, she got very angry at them and said, "I shall fly to them now, drown their boat, and let them all perish." I entreated her, saying, "For God's sake, don't. The proverb advises, 'Be kind to those who hurt you, no matter what. They are my brothers after all.'" In this manner I entreated her and pacified her. Afterward, she took me and flew away with me until she brought me home and put me down on the roof of my house. I climbed down, threw the doors open and dug up the money I had buried. Then I went out and, greeting the people in the market, reopened my shop. When I came home in the evening, I found these 2 dogs tied up. And when they saw me, they came to me, wept, and rubbed themselves against me. I started when I suddenly heard my wife say, "Oh my lord, these are your brothers." I asked, "Who has done this to them?" She replied, "I sent my sister and asked her to do it. They will stay in this condition for 10 years, after which they may be delivered." Then she told me where to find her in the future, and departed. The 10 years have passed, and I was with my 2 brothers on my way to her to have the spell lifted, when I met this man, together with this old man, with the deer. When I asked him about himself, he told me about his encounter with you, and I resolved not to leave until I found out what would happen between you and him. This is my story. Isn't it amazing? The demon replied, "By God, it is strange and amazing. I grant you 1/3 of my claim on him for his crime." Then the 3rd old man said, "Demon, don't disappoint me. If I told you a story that is stranger and more amazing than the first 2, would you grant me 1/3 of your claim on him for his crime?" The demon replied, "I will." Then the old man said, "Thank you, demon, please listen." But morning overtook Scheherazade and she lapsed into silence. Then her sister said, "What an amazing story." Scheherazade replied, "The rest is even more amazing." The king said to himself, "I will not have her put to death until I hear what happened to the old man and the demon. Then I will have her put to death, as is my custom with the others." Stay tuned for the amazing end of this story in the next chapter of the Arabian Nights.